Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
There's truly something about science fiction that brings up the ethical conundrums that we face on a day-to-day basis. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brains on not just current projects, but how they got started, state of the industry, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you would like to subscribe to our podcast, and we certainly hope that you do, you are listening right now, you can do that basically wherever you find your podcasts. Amazon, Google, Spotify, Apple, it's all good. And plus, every single one of our episodes is archived over at our YouTube channel. We'd also really like it if you followed us on social media. You can do that at Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And finally, and dare I say most importantly, please give us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest movie news, reviews from the worlds of theatrical, where there is theatrical, VOD, streaming, television, anything worthwhile talking about, because that's just what we love to do. And you know what? On today's episode, we're going to be talking about something I love to talk about, and that would be science fiction. We're going to look at the brand new movie hitting VOD as we speak. It is called Listening, from writer-director Khailli Sullins, and it is it's a really smart and engaging piece of science fiction, very much based in like some real science, and it deals with a lot of the issues around I guess telepathy. I mean, not that that's a real world thing, but it brings up these ethical questions of what's right and what's wrong when these two young men discover telepathy and how to implement that and how to use it to their own devices, and then the government gets involved, and it's all a bit of a compelling mess, but it's the kind of sci-fi I really like, because it definitely makes you think, and it goes to show that you can do science fiction on a budget when you're doing the right kind of story, and Khalil and his team definitely do that. And on this show, we had the unique pleasure of talking with not only writer-director Khailli Sullins, but we talked with star Amber Marie Bollinger about just their experiences on shooting the film and working and the whole nine yards. And it was a fun talk, which I certainly hope you enjoy, because I know that I did. All right. Well, obviously, first off, just thank you so much to the both of you for the time today. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Now, obviously, congratulations on the movie, man. I got a kick out of it. Can you walk me through sort of the inspiration? Because I mean, I'm a sucker for science fiction, but I'm even more of a sucker for science fiction when you're working on a budget. And this film didn't feel like it was working on a budget, but you had to be working on a budget. Like, science fiction inside of a budget is always sort of a very interesting challenge to me.
Yeah, totally. I'm the same way. Yeah, I love sci-fi, and I love sci-fi that's like conceptual, and in some ways, the original concept, is like, what if telepathy was real? What if there was a way that you could, have this superpower, but using science to do it, and sort of basing it in the real world that way, I think made it more believable and allowed us to do it without tons of visual effects or really high budget. But it still, looks amazing, because we kind of put our money into locations and production design and amazing cinematography and stuff, and traveled to a whole bunch of different locations and around the world to Cambodia and stuff too. So that, it's still hopefully a movie that really looks awesome, even though it's relatively low budget.
Well, and I mean, casting on something like this has also got to be sort of vital, because you've got to get people to buy into the source material. Can you talk me through just your casting process and finding people like Amber to come on board, just to sort of dive into this world? Because it really feels like if people aren't sort of accepting the world that you're trying to build, the movie's not going to work.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, casting was a lot of fun. We did it ourselves, interviewed, auditioned hundreds of actors, I guess. And Amber quickly rose to the top, and then did some chemistry readings with, testing with different people. And yeah, we're really lucky to get Thomas and Amber and Artie, and yeah, the whole crew was so great.
Now, Amber, when you're reading for something like this, like how do you just sort of have to let yourself go into the material? Because I mean, I can imagine, depending on if you get the whole script or if you get pages, you're trying to get a sense of sort of the environment that these characters are living in.
Oh yeah. You definitely have to like immerse yourself in that world. But what Khalil wrote was so easy to dive into. I was so excited to audition for this, and I think the only the only challenge I had at first was like I had never said those words before, and but surprisingly, they came easily to me, which yeah, that just surprised me. But it could have just been because the world was already rich and it was already like I'm in, and now I just have to like learn some new words.
Well, and from a performance standpoint as well, it really does feel like playing in this, like you say, the words aside, having to learn the new words is one thing, but there is really sort of an interesting sort of moral ambiguity that these characters are living in and have to sort of navigate. And I can imagine it makes for sort of an interesting a journey to take when you're trying to sort of build a character and sort of do the job, as it were.
Yeah, there's no skimping, there was some, I think, there was some shots that didn't make the film, but I think in the full script, it really enriched each character. And I felt like Jordan wasn't such, she wasn't a one-dimensional human. Khalil wrote her as very three-dimensional with, feelings all around. It wasn't just black and white for her. She struggled with a lot of decisions. And yeah, it just makes it so much easier to dive into a world like that when the writer has created that for you, and then all you have to do is just sprinkle it in and make it come alive. So thanks, Khalil.
Now, I'm kind of curious, Khalil, from your perspective, because science fiction always is a genre that, like, on one end, this could have just been, government bad, reading other people's thoughts bad, but it really does sort of try to sort of dive into the moral, like I said, the moral ambiguity of being able to read another person's thoughts. What is it about the genre, do you think, that allows sort of this kind of emotional play that we get dealing with like issues that, I mean, I don't want to say real world, but they feel a little more real in terms of, when it comes down to things like privacy and, things of that nature?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's very real world. This technology is like actually being developed right now, but like while I was writing it, the whole thing was kind of a metaphor for our relationship with technology and
Yeah.
social media and our phones and everything. And yeah, taking it a step further to reading each other's thoughts, and suddenly what you think about you're experiencing is reality. And then if corporations or governments are like, listening to your thoughts, that gets pretty heavy pretty fast. And so I kind of like the idea of exploring it through the characters and having David and Ryan sort of start on opposite sides of kind of what they thought the right thing to do with this technology was. And you might start with one character really kind of believing what they're saying, and then by the end maybe switch sides or question, like you're saying, it's definitely ambiguous. And I think that's a reflection of the world around us, right? Like the movie isn't anti-technology. I'm not anti-technology, but we do have to be aware of how it's being used, our relationship with technology, what it's doing to us, and how we communicate with our friends and family and our relationships with loved ones. These are like really deep questions that don't have easy black and white answers.
I love that you did take the film to Cambodia and sort of gave it a bit of a, I don't want to say spiritual, but at least gave it more of a sort of self-aware and sort of conscious sort of mentality to it, about trying to bring in other sort of disciplines and devices to really the issue that you're debating. I think it felt important to me to sort of have at least that other perspective, as opposed to, like you say, this isn't, technology good or technology bad. This can evolve to something past that.
Yeah, totally. And, it is spiritual in a way. I mean, for me, like, I do believe, kind of our existence is our thoughts. Thoughts are reality. And as I was doing research into the science of it, found some like scientific studies that said the same thing, that the way we experience our reality in our brain is just as real as the physical world around us, and so with the film, I wanted to turn that into like a very real thing. If you're plugging into someone's brain and experiencing what they're thinking about, suddenly just a fleeting thought or something you don't want to be thinking about in that moment, you experience as true and real. And that is kind of a spiritual thing, and learning to then, control that. Or like there's a relationship with David and his wife, for instance, and it's kind of interesting, like, okay, if you're plugging into your spouse's brain and they even have a thought, of another man or another woman or infidelity, you experience that as real. And is that fair? Is it not? It's like, okay, you shouldn't cheat on your spouse, obviously, but maybe you shouldn't even be thinking about it, and is it your fault if you do? And that sort of complex relationship with our own thoughts and cultivating, our own realities by like what you think about more is what manifests itself in the world. There's definitely a spiritual aspect to it that, yeah, I did want to explore.
Do you get a lot of time on set with your actors to sort of dive into those issues, or is it just a question of trying to stay true to the words and trying to finish pages? Because like you say, it's an independent shoot. You're going to be on a budget.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, Thomas was definitely really into like discussing, yeah, all the moral implication stuff. Yeah, Amber, I don't know. What do you think? Did we have time to dive?
We had several rehearsals beforehand too, and I do remember talking at length with Khalil about, yeah, kind of like what it all meant, or diving into each character. And we did have time to work. I mean, yes, I think we all showed up and knew our stuff and felt confident about shooting. So yeah, we did have time to play though, that's for sure. I do remember playing with it a bit.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I love to hear that. And I mean, it feels important to be able to have that, I don't want to say freedom, but at least sort of the ability to sort of play with the character and play with the words a little bit, especially when you're trying to dive into something that can be kind of spiritual and deep in many ways.
Yeah, and then but then at the same time, the what Khalil wrote, there were definitely times when he'd be like, make sure that you say this, because it is very specific and it is very important that you say that this way. So by us being able to play at least and dive into the characters and talk with him about it before getting on set, and then having to, say the specific words truly, that was really helpful. So yeah.
Now, I'm curious, Amber, were you a science fiction fan before you got into this? Or like, I'm always kind of curious about people's fandoms, because I mean, especially in this business, we're all fans first. Nobody gets into this business not being a fan. Like I'm always curious about sort of those origin stories, about what people sort of were influenced by and how what they were formed by, especially in their earlier years.
I'm a huge science fiction fan. I'm a huge sci-fi movie fan. I love like even like Battlestar Galactica. But yeah, I like horror and sci-fi is usually like those are the genres that I really gravitate to. So when I got this sci-fi script, I was so excited. And there were enriching characters, and I could tell this story like a human story through sci-fi. I was psyched. I was very excited.
Now, Khalil, I'm kind of curious for you, when you're putting together a story, what is the first thing that comes to your mind, like when you're starting to craft a script? Is it a story idea? Is it a character? Is it a genre? What really is sort of the ground base for you when you're putting a film together like this together?
I mean, every movie's different. Every script is different. Yeah, I kind of try to discipline myself with just being able to come up with ideas before I write any script. I'll spend a few weeks and literally just come up with like 100 different ideas, trying, like, the process of inspiration is something that really happens like that. It's like a lightning bolt. It doesn't take a long time to come up with ideas, and then developing which ones are the good ones and how to get there. And so sometimes it's a character, sometimes it's a plot, sometimes it's like a what if. I think this one was more a what if, was the original seed of an idea. Like I was saying, like, what if someone invented telepathy, and what would the implications of that be in every aspect, in our personal lives, in our relationships, in society at large, with government. So yeah, that was kind of the original idea, and then really got heavy into researching it because it's a hard sci-fi. So it's all like based on real science and everything that's still theoretically possible. So those were like where it started, and then really got more into like, exploring the characters and how they would experience this world and what it would mean in their lives to have this technology.
From both your perspectives, can you think back and think of maybe one movie or even one moment in your lives that was sort of the pivot point for you to sort of get into the business?
Hmm. Yeah, let's see. I mean, for me, like, I grew up as an artist doing visual arts, painting, sculpting, photography, and always loved movies too. Um, but so yeah, the college I went to, Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, I was originally going to go there as a fine arts student. And I always kind of thought, like, as a teenager, I like kind of idolized like Julian Schnabel and these kind of like
Oh, cool. Okay.
painters who had become directors. And I was like, oh, maybe that'll be my like career path. I can be a painter, an artist for like 20 years and later in life make movies. But then when I was talking to a college and showing them my portfolio, they're like, well, based on these videos, you could probably get into the film school if you wanted, is not just the fine art department. That got me like so excited or whatever. And I was like, okay, no, I want to make movies right now. That's totally what I want to go for. Cause yeah. And then in college, I really fell in love with writing. Like in high school, I didn't really like writing much, but really once I learned more about filmmaking, realized writing is kind of, in some ways, the most creative part of the process, where you're generating something from nothing. And just really fell in love with that process.
For sure. What about you, Amber?
Gosh, I always loved my dad. My dad always watched like old movies or old shows, so I always gravitated towards like I Love Lucy, or even like the women in comedy.
Right. Okay.
Which is funny. I always loved that. But then it wasn't until I really when I went to college, I started out kind of behind the scenes. And did like video production and audio production and things like that. And when I lived across of an independent movie theater, it was a tiny movie theater that maybe sat like 25 guests, I guess. And I would go there just to watch independent films. And I remember the movie Candy. Remember, with Abby Cornish?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember being blown away. I don't know why I was blown away by that movie, but I remember just being in awe of Abby Cornish. And so it kind of switched from being like into comedy into like, maybe I should, go, take it a little bit more seriously. And I think that was the movie that kind of set me on that path to maybe take it more seriously.
Well, you know what? I love both those answers, because I think it's proof positive that, especially in this business, there are no straight lines when it comes to getting involved. And ideas take time to develop, and I think films take time to develop. I know this has been done for a little bit, but people are going to get to see it again, and I think it's going to find its niche. And I just want to thank you both for the time today, and just say congratulations again on the film. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.